More than 30 years.
More than 30 years. There you go. Dr. Nancy Little is a licensed professional counselor since 1983. She's counseled thousands of clients in her part-time private practice and her counseling positions at the University of North Texas. She is a professional speaker, author, online trainer. She leads both virtual and in-person programs on mental health and wellness-related topics as a consultant. I would imagine in today's times, we're keeping her very busy. Dr. Little earned the designation of professional member of the National Speakers Association in 2016 and has made significant contributions through her varied leadership roles. She participates in varied leadership women programs. Her passion for philanthropy extends to the University of Kentucky, where she's also an active and co-chair of the membership committee. This is a busy lady, and she is taking time for us today. Please welcome Nancy Little.
Always, I will take time. Woo, there it is. For these special people that I see seated in the chairs out here, just taking a moment. Oh, and the bears joined us too. All right. We have bear energy in here. Well, we have a lot to cover today, and we're going to be dabbling in the idea of developing conflict resilience. Now, during the prelims, Philip shared with a few of us that he still has some work to do in some areas, like particularly related to the freeways of Dallas. And we laugh about the traffic and the drivers, but the truth is we all have areas where we could improve in dealing with conflict in a more healthy, loving, and even joyful manner. But today, I'm going to start with a brief story to introduce the topic of peace. And I brought this basket. I'll be putting things into the peace basket as we go. And this will be an idea that you too can incorporate as the days and weeks move on. So Catherine Marshall, she was one of my favorite authors as a young girl. And she tells a story about a king who sought the perfect painting of peace. And the king offered a prize to the artist who could best capture what peace really is. So many artists went for it. They made an attempt. The king looked at all the pictures closely and narrowed it down to two. The first one was of a calm lake. Visualize with me. The lake was a perfect mirror for the towering and yet peaceful mountains all around it. Overhead, there was a blue sky with those lovely white fluffy clouds. Trees were blowing gently in the wind, and a few birds were nestled in its branches. Everybody that saw it thought, wow, this is the perfect picture of peace. But there was another one the king looked at, and it was a picture that had mountains as well. But these were rugged and bare mountains. Above, there was an angry sky from which the rain fell down, and lightning was happening. Down the side of a mountain tumbled a roaring waterfall. This did not look peaceful at all. But if you look closely, behind the waterfall was a tiny bush growing out of a crack in the rock. And in the bush, a mother bird had built a nest. There, in the rush of angry water, sat a mother bird, warm and quiet in her nest. So which picture do you think won the prize? The first one or the second one? You may have already guessed. The king chose the second picture because, he explained, Peace does not mean to be in a place where there's no noise, no trouble, no hard work. Peace means to be in the midst of all those things and still be calm in your heart. That is the true meaning of peace. So just take a moment to lean into that concept. We are all looking and seeking peace. And we are going to explore today a resource that I recently found that will give us some new insights. And the book is entitled Conflict Resilience, Negotiating Disagreement Without Giving Up or Giving In. Does that sound like something we could all benefit from? Yes. So the two authors, Robert Bourdon and Joel Salinas, have come together. They assimilated years of research. And this book is literally hot off the press. I found out about it, I think on Tuesday, ordered it, got it on Thursday, and in my own unique way, speed read through 400 pages so I could share some concepts with you today. I have my yellow stickies and my highlights. Because I know that there are many people that are struggling to find peace within. Despite all the things we say and do when we come to Unity on Sunday, we go out and live our lives during the week. And there's some discord. People are getting into arguments, sometimes online, sometimes face-to-face, sometimes on the freeway. That can be pretty dangerous. But this whole storm process is calling us to be more, to become more of who we are here to become and live truly on purpose. When we live that way, when we're connected to our spiritual nature, that allows us to be more authentic and, in fact, to be more peaceful. I also am weaving a few concepts of one of our Unity long-held books and traditions, The Eye of the Storm, by Reverend Gary Simmons into these concepts. Because, why not? So when we get clear on conflict resilience and learn some of the skills that are affiliated with it, we can learn to be with the discomfort. We can learn to sit in those places that we might have previously wanted to run away from. But we know that we have to be present in our most important relationships, in our spiritual communities, maybe in the town halls if you're trying to attend any of those, or other areas, your work, your business. We do not do ourselves any favors if we can't be peaceful in the midst of conflict. So Dr. John Gottman, who is not on this slide, but I'm going to mention him and not delve into him too deeply, but I do want to say that he does a phenomenal job of describing in great detail in both videos you can find online and books that he has written about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And those things are so dangerous and detrimental to relationships. And the 4 horsemen include these 4 destructive components, and they often predict the end of relationships. The first one is criticism. We know what it feels like to be criticized, wherever that occurs. A worsening quality or effort beyond criticism is contempt, and that is when the person's not only disagreeing with you, they're giving you the impression that they think you're totally crazy, right? Some of you have had that experience. Or you're experiencing defensiveness or stonewalling. Gottman has research to support how damaging those are to relationships. But what do when we find ourselves in the midst of disagreement? We may notice that we're having a stress reaction. We may notice that we're sweating or our heart rate has accelerated. What else do you notice? Do you feel it in your tummy? Do you feel the urgency to get out of the space? Do you start having racing thoughts or headaches? Or do you become totally unable to think? We know that our brain wants to protect us. They want to keep us safe from whatever threat that we may be feeling or experiencing. So you need to, first of all, in your peace bucket, put in a big dose of courage. That courage is going to help you to stay with the discomfort and to stay with the anxiety that may be escalating. Because conflict is a part of life, right? As much as we love to think that it only happens to other people, we not only have conflict with others, we deal with internal conflict as well. Do I go to the gym? Do I watch NCAA basketball that's on all weekend? Do I go out to eat? Do I visit a friend that's in the hospital? We wrestle with some of the decisions that we make in our own lives. So all of these skills that we can incorporate give us the ability to stay present. Because what this research found, to sum it up in a nutshell, is that people really do benefit and derive great insights and an expanded worldview when they can sit in the discomfort of conflict. Isn't that exciting? We can do something different and live more peacefully. So when we get embroiled in conflict, there are some things that happen. Probably most of you have heard of fight, flight, or freeze, right? Fight is when you get really combative. You want to say something back to the other person. You want to exert control. Flight is when you want to speed on out of there. You want to run away, or you just shut down. Flight doesn't mean you necessarily leave, but you stop engaging. Freezing are those moments when we lose our train of thought, and we're like, I can't think of anything to say. We're just stuck. And I know I've had the experience of leaving and later rethinking it, and then all of a sudden I can think of all these great things that I could have said or done, but they don't often happen in the moment. Now there's two more that have been added to the list in this conflict resilience book. One is called fawning. Fawning is when we become very placating, when we bend over backwards to try to appease the person or the situation where we're finding disagreement. And the final one is fester, which is also quite interesting because it's when somebody engages in behavior that may mean partaking of drugs or alcohol or doing something else to shut down. And those situations in and of themselves can be highly destructive or even deadly. So these are some of the things that our brains, when we get activated, that we get the trigger to do. Now, this is ancient history. You know, back in ancient times, it made sense to do some of these behaviors because we were trying to survive as a species. Right now, wouldn't it be better to develop some collaboration and some common ground and get along? So there's also situations where we are having what we might call a reaction to an adverse life experience. Some of you might have experienced some form of abuse at some part of your life, and all this colors and influence how we are able to respond. But hopefully you can stay centered. So I came up with a list of some of the factors that make conflict uncomfortable for me. Now, you're going to come up with your own list, right? Because you're different. What are the things that happen for you? You'll ponder this in your conflict journaling that I'm going to invite and encourage you to do. For me, I notice one of the things I do is I break out in a sweat. I notice that my heartbeat accelerates. I notice that I kind of get this tingly feeling all over. And then I start to recall past disagreements. And maybe that's encouraging to me. Oftentimes it's not. I came from a relationship that things did not end well when there was disagreement, where there was both verbal and physical issues that develop. I worry that I can't find my voice. I worry that I'm not going to be able to say the right thing. And then I also notice that I get very defensive. I start feeling less than or insecure or self-doubting. And finally, there's a whole host of other kinds of reactions and responses. However, as we learn more about ourselves, as we, let's say, just even moving through this time of Lent, where you may be adding something that you're going to do each day, or you're taking away something that you've done previously, this could be a time for you to really take a look at conflict. Because we want to become more spiritual. We want to evolve on our spiritual path. And we can do that by sitting with and leaning into the conflict that this research suggests people ultimately say is almost always worth it. And there are sometimes you need to advocate for yourself, right? Maybe you're asking for a raise. Maybe you're asking for a different visitation agreement with your ex-spouse. Maybe you're trying to work out where you're going to invest some money that you recently acquired. All of these require some discussion. But when we get all activated, it becomes harder to do. So we benefit from leaning in. We get a more expanded view of ourselves. We feel better about ourselves when we can practice compassion and kindness to other people. So most of us learn two things along the way somewhere. Maybe it was in your family, maybe it was from watching movies, maybe it was seeing kids in your class get beat up if they disagreed with the quote-unquote bully. Maybe it was something that happened in a work setting where you learned that things did not go well for people who got engaged in conflict. So we learn that it's scary and that we should avoid it. But here's the one that I had not thought of until I read this book, that we often view conflict as a sign of failure, that we think less of ourselves if we find ourselves caught up in disagreements. And I've heard people say, even about unity communities when there's disagreement and conflict, well, that's not very unity. Aren't we all supposed to just get along? Well, yes and no. You know, we do have differing opinions. We do have different perspectives. So if you will, just imagine that where this lectern is, that there's a giant globe. There's a giant globe. Can you all see it? You know what a globe looks like, everybody? Okay, so we could get into a disagreement about what's on the globe. So if you're seated on this side of the room or down close, you may see one thing, whereas if you're seated on this side, you're seeing something completely different. So if I say, what's on the globe, and you answer, you're going to say, I see Asia. And you answer, you may see, I see North America. Who's right? Both of you are right. because we have different perspectives. We have different worldviews, and that's what gets tricky. We can both be right in the sense that we have different visions that we're seeing and that we're cultivating. So here's another tool that we'll put in our peace basket, breath work. One of the outcomes of this research was the success that people had in staying in the moment with a particular kind of breath work called cyclic breathing. Have you all heard of it? That means you take a deep inhale through your nose and you pause, but then you go a step beyond and you take it up another notch. So you go so far and then you breathe in again. And that cyclic breathing seemed to be very useful and beneficial to the participants that were learning to engage in highly conflictual situations. Some of them were debating international policy. Some were law students. Whatever the case, it was definitely a situation where there could be great polarization and adversarial feelings. So that breathing gives you a little neurological boost. It helps your brain keep working, keep functioning. It helps you to be able to discern what are your best next steps and to be tactical and clear, but also kind in exerting your own needs, in your own interest. Very powerful stuff. How we doing? Are the wheels turning, hopefully? So one of the things that I learned from doing this globe experiment in a classroom setting and having everybody stand around it is that it's really important just to allow people to verbalize, to state their experience. People need and want to be heard. I had another experience at the University of North Texas where I was a part of a diversity training team for about 10 years. And we had 2 activities that we did that were so life-changing for me. One was called a speak out. And that's where whoever was speaking said in front of the room without interruption what they hoped that no one would ever say, think, or do about their group again. Now, they might have identified as poor. They might have identified in some way based on their culture or their race or their sexual orientation. There were a whole host of ways. My category during one of these was as a divorced woman, because, you know, there are quite, at the time, that was my status, a divorced woman and a single parent. There can be some negative stereotypes about that. But some of the speak outs were so powerful because we had some people, even in our diversity group in the 90s, that embraced diversity, but because of their background, their religion, their growing up, whatever, they still struggled mostly with sexual orientation. And to hear people speak out on this topic changed them. It changes you because you can argue with statistics or facts or numbers all day long, but when you hear somebody's personal story and how they're being impacted, it touches your heart. And so we want to be able to let people and allow those people that we care about and love, whether they're family or they're in this sanctuary right now, to have their voice. We want to be curious. And one of the most difficult phrases for me to say, and maybe for some of you too, when I'm embroiled in conflict, is tell me more. Now, Gary Simmons suggests that phrase, and it just sometimes I have to almost pull it out of my mouth to say, okay, tell me more. because there's a part of me that's already been thinking of responses. Do you all do that too sometimes when you're in a discussion or a disagreement? So we are going to continue to sit with all of these concepts beyond what I can cover today in the limited amount of time that I have, and do some journaling so you can become more clear about what comes up for you. I've even noticed my reaction to television programs or movies when there's really intense conflict. What comes up for me? So we want to be able to become more resilient, to become stronger. This is where a steady dose of affirmations can be beneficial, right? We love affirmations in Unity. You can develop some affirmations around staying conflict resilient. And it is so much more of a realistic goal than to just say, well, we'll just work it out. Let's just get to resolution. Let's just make peace here. But you can just stay. Anybody ever said, let's just agree to disagree? Sometimes that's where you are in the process. So as you move forward, as we move forward in this contentious time where there is so much political dissension and so much on social media, so much in the media, period, how do we stay calm? Because you really already have everything that you need. We talk in Unity a lot about our Christ abilities. You have everything that you need to do this. But I have a little card at my table, which is going to be in the hallway, along with my book, Energy Sparks to Recharge, Refresh, and Revitalize, because there's some valuable tips and tools in that resource as well. But in the little card, I have an activity that comes from Gary's work in the Q process, Gary Simmons, where you take a look at somebody else. You take a look at someone that you admire. And I'm just going to skip right on through that one. And then you write who they are and what you admire about them, knowing that you do possess those same qualities. Well, I threw in the metaphysical meaning of the term peacemaker. We all like to think of ourselves as being one who brings peace. But I love the definition, and it's so consistent with everything else that we've talked about today. It doesn't mean somebody that avoids conflict or discord. It talks about somebody who can say peace to the turbulent waves of thought, those thoughts racing through our head, and have it occur. That we can calm ourselves down, that we can get harmonious within ourselves. Because if we want to have world peace, guess who it starts with? Not anybody out there. It starts inside each of us. And that's our ongoing challenge. So just take a breath, knowing that you have what it takes. And here's the thing. Every Sunday at Unity churches all over the globe, we say the same thing or something similar. We make this affirmation. There is only one presence and one power in the universe and in my life. Well, if that's true, can there be anybody opposing you? Is there the devil making you do something, as Flip Wilson used to say? I have thought at times, I'll be honest, that somebody was just trying to make my life miserable. You know, maybe it was my mom, maybe it was my friend, maybe it was my boss, but that was before I discovered Unity. That is not true. Okay, so we are winding down, and there I am, jumping courageously in front of a waterfall in Iceland, and the rainbow appeared. If you want to use pictures, take your own pictures, and you can put them in your slides without any worries. But that is the one power, philosophy in action, that we are one. We are one with nature. We are one with all living creatures. And as you move forward, you're in the midst of a very interesting time, right? And we say this all the time. Isn't life fascinating? Isn't life interesting? We are in the process of drawing a new spiritual leader to this community. So how can I truly live from a position of wholeness, from a position of centeredness, and know that the universe supports me, and I can have my voice, and it will be okay? Doesn't that give you a stronger position to attract the person that's truly going to be a part of this community in a way that works for everybody? And wrapping up, this is the slide. I got off a little bit. I know none of you ever do anything like that, but this is the people that you greatly admire. They could be living or dead. They could be somebody you actually knew or never met, just a historical figure. And as you look at what you love about them or admire about them and you discern that, it becomes clear that those are qualities that you have inside you as well. Stop by my table and I'll give you a card to write that down, because it's so vitally important to recognize the vast potential that you have already developed and the potential that you have to unfold. We know we have only begun to scratch the surfaces. And I am increasingly one of the oldest people in the room. When I first started here, I was one of the youngest people in the room, but you know, that happens, and I am grateful. So I want to conclude with The Blessing of Courage, which is a poem by a woman named Jan Richardson. I strongly encourage you to look at some of her writing. I cannot say where it lives, only that it comes to the heart that is open, to the heart that asks, to the heart that does not turn away. It can take practice, days of tugging at what keeps us bound, seasons of pushing against what keeps our dreaming small. When it arrives, it might surprise you by how quiet it is, how it moves with such grace for possessing such power, but you will know it by its strength that rises from within you to meet it, by the release of the knot in the center of your chest that suddenly lets go. You will recognize it by how still your fear becomes as it loosens its grip, perhaps never quite leaving you, but calmly turning into joy as you enter the life that is finally your own. That is courage. And we're going to take this idea and these concepts that we've explored today into the sacred space of meditation. So if you'll join with me by taking a deep cleansing breath. And we open our hearts to those gentle nudges that Spirit offers to help us continue this spiritual journey. And we rest in this space with a willingness to listen for an opening that allows new insights to inform us. And we take a moment in the quiet. With another deep inhale and release, we move our focus gradually back to this time and place. We are grateful for what we began to hear, for what we felt were possibilities, And we know that we can go back and recapture the benefit of the silence at any moment. For all the joy, for all the love, for all the positivity that arises in our heart when we get to a place of peace, we say, thank you, God, and so it is. Amen.